All right, welcome back to the main basketball rankings podcast. I am your host, basketball data nerd Lucas McNally, and joining me today is formerly of Celtic Stuff Live, Jon Duke. Welcome back. You've survived
Good
basketball
to be
season
back.
once again. And
Almost in
are
one piece.
and are you surviving the heel point disaster of 2024?
I,
The
I just like to follow it vicariously through you. I just think it's a lot of fun to see you. That's why you're wearing the hat because you haven't pulled your hair out at this point. It's
Yeah, I'm like trying. I was trying to get caught up on because I was like got behind on them, and then I was trying to get caught up, and I was like, the hill points are all wrong, and I'm like, what? And then I went and looked. I'm like, oh my god, it's a disaster. But it happens every year, so what are you gonna do? They might have fixed
well,
it
and
by
I just
now.
and it's thankfully it's. I mean, I hate to say it for spring sport folks, but if this were what 3 months ago, or 3.5 months ago right now, it would be a state of emergency. Janet Mills would be on TV, and Maine Public Radio would be following. So,
Well, lad,
all due respect to my brethren of baseball, softball, lacrosse, but yeah,
yeah,
this is not good, Bob. I mean, it's the old Mad Men, meme.
yeah. It's
But
well,
it
last year it got screwed up for basketball season, and like no one noticed. But like at one point, a win against Holton wasn't counting. So it was all of B North was wrong, but not so wrong that people noticed until someone said to me like, "Hey,
that's
why is yours different than the MPA's? Shouldn't this?" And then that was it. And it was like 3 days before the season ended. And I like called them. I was like, "Hey, you guys might want to get on this like now cuz it's going to get real bad if some people figure this out and, you got prelim games wrong and stuff."
imagine. Well, imagine if like Mountain View was like because they were 7 seed this year. Imagine if that
Yeah.
if it was this year and they're like a play, they're playing a prelim game because like who knows what could have happened because such weird things occur in the
Yeah,
world
they
of
could be
deal
like
points.
halfway to
But
Caribou and they call them up like, "Hey, turn around the bus, guys."
hey, by the way, hey, Coach Hurd, just take a turn around here in
Yeah,
Lincoln
by the
and come
way,
back.
you've got Washington Academy at home, turns out, and not Caribou on the road. And hopefully you haven't left yet.
They're already in Bucksport, so they're almost
Yeah.
up to Thorndike. So get there fast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it feels like there should be a better system than this, but it's
I mean, there
that's
is
why we
one.
all have
It's but
subscriptions to main basketball rankings, right? That's
there you
what we
go.
do.
There you go.
Sells
So we're
itself.
$6 a month. Well worth it. Well worth it. So I wanted to have somebody on. Let's set the context here. I wanted to have somebody on to preview the Pacers Celtics series, but I couldn't find a Pacers fan in the state of Maine, which is understandable. I was surprised I found a Cavs fan. And I already knew that I about a Heat fan. So you offered to fill in and be the Pacers fan, and I have done no research, as I said. So it's like I basically will call this an audition for ESPN because I don't think they do any research either.
No, definitely
I think
not
that
from what I've
I
seen this
think they
morning.
have a meeting at the beginning of the day and they go, okay, who's got what weird take, and
Yeah.
we'll go from there. And I have a question for you. Actually, I thought about this as I was mowing the lawn this morning. Is Kendrick Perkins mad at the Celtics for trading him? Is
Um,
that what's going on?
it it feels like there should be a better reason for what he does and says than that. Um,
Yeah,
it's strange because I was watching the Stephen A. Smith podcast. He had KG on last night, and there KG kept talking about how Perkins bleeds green and all this and that. Like, dude, have you been on the internet? Like, he is
Yeah.
probably the biggest Celtic hater there is right now. So
It's so
I,
weird
I
because like
don't understand it.
and didn't CBS NBC Sports Boston like give him his break on air?
Yeah, yeah. He
It's
was. I
so
mean,
weird.
that was. He did he did a road game in Houston with Mike and Scal, and that was sort of the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. And then, he's just a hot take machine at this point. It's
Yeah,
kind of
it's
sad in a way because I he was always sort of like that homespun, folksy guy, and going those who go back in time, who were not like, even like the pre, new big three. Those of
mm-hmm.
us who were, on the internet talking about these things when Kendrick Perkins didn't say anything, and he and Al Jefferson were sort of the linchpins of the Celtic future.
Yeah.
It was a really sort of it was he's kind of like that's our guy and he's the quiet one and Al's the talkative one and to see it turn into what this is just gross.
It's gross and it's
Yeah.
bizarre and I don't understand it. And the media, all of the media around this team is, I don't, it's very confusing to me. Like I get the shiny toy
Yeah,
element of Minnesota, but
totally. Yeah, and we've seen it over and over. The new thing, the new shiny toy is perfect, and there's nothing wrong with and Edwards, and you've got everyone who's Luca. The shine is starting to come off Luca, just like it's coming off Tatum. But it's just such a weird sort of um, that part of it isn't new, but just the extremes and the way that we sort of have stretched this, the point where you've got Alan Hahn on Get Up today talking about sort of ESPN about basically how Jason Tatum hasn't done anything ever, and we're putting Jalen Brunson ahead of him, and like all this like crazy stuff. It's like we were like the Celtics were in this spot 2017-18 where we were the
yeah,
plucky upstart, but we never were going to win it because we just didn't have the horses. Now you have
right.
the horses, and it's like, well, now they can't do anything. It's such a no-win situation. It's
Yeah,
silly.
and like I was listening to your favorite, Bill Simmons, and he's talking
Uh,
about like teams that have been to like whatever it is, Eastern or Conference Finals appearances in X number of years, and how many they've all won like 3 or 4 rings, and I'm like, yeah, but I don't think any of them did that this young.
right.
Like they did it like after like starting with their fourth or fifth year in the league, and so they were like 30 at the end of that run, or 31, something like that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, they won rings. They weren't doing it at age 19 like Tatum was.
Right.
And you're not going to win a, a title at 19 as the guy. Of course, he wasn't the guy at 19, but those
No.
like first couple were kind of flukes, and we were just like, oh, the East is kind of open, and Embiid falls on his sword in the second round every year, reliably,
Seems to
or
happen.
sometimes in the first round.
Right. Yeah.
And
No.
so, hey,
Yeah. That's no, but you're right. That's exactly what it's been. Jalen Brown gets there as a rookie to the Eastern Conference Finals on a 2017 Celtics team that was, IT and very little else.
mhm,
They had Horford, then the next year with Tatum, sort of a similar scenario, but they really were a few minutes away, and maybe Terry Rozier being able to find the ocean from the boat of shooting that actually they could have beaten LeBron.
yep,
19 was the crazy Kyrie year. 20 was the bubble, but they get they have the situation. They get to the conference finals, probably lose to a Miami Heat team they should have beaten, but still, they that's we're talking 21, 22-year-old Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown.
yep,
They get to the finals. After that, they to Golden State last year again. Probably should have beaten the Heat, but that that's the one that I think that really sticks in your craw a little bit for me.
yeah.
Um,
I think that's
but
the one that broke everybody.
I think so, and I think that's why there's just no respect.
Right.
You look all these postseason awards. We're going to see all the NBA teams here on Wednesday, I think, but all of these awards, I can't think of another NBA team that has been so statistically dominant as this Celtics team has, and gotten absolutely no respect. I mean, it's
Yeah.
totally Rodney Dangerfield situation here. It's no respect at all. I'm telling you, it's crazy.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, you listen to Bill Simmons. He's like, I don't know if they can beat the Mavericks. I don't know if they can beat the Timberwolves. Like, he's got them as underdogs to teams that aren't even playing anymore.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
that's true. Yeah,
he's
yeah.
like,
I
I
think the
think the
Knicks should
Lakers
take
were
it
going to beat
down.
them.
I mean, Bill is the king of what he saw last, right?
Yeah,
Whatever he saw last, he just saw the Timberwolves come back to beat Denver, and if it was reversed, he would have been, oh, Denver's amazing. Like that man has no soul. He has no core, no center to what he talks about. It's
my working theory is that he's reverse jinxing us. That he's trying to like not jinx us.
like Perk. That would make
Yeah,
sense.
that
That
would
would
make
be
sense.
a rational, very reasonable approach. But
What's weird to me about him and Anthony Edwards is he's Mister like basketball history, and I'm watching Anthony Edwards, and I'm like, I know a little bit about NBA history, not as much as he does, and I'm like, show me the guy who won a title as the number one guy that young
right,
in a season where he had never won a playoff series before.
yeah,
Because I can't think of anybody unless
no,
it's like Bill Russell. And so
Duncan.
maybe Ant is Bill Russell. I don't know.
That could be. I mean, Duncan is the only one that I think, to me, stands similarly. And of course, that was a weird lockout year. You also had David Robinson, and you had
Right.
really a fully formed. That was such an anomaly.
Yeah.
Um, it's really Duncan and then Bird and E. And that's also again a very not that I
Right.
don't think you can draw the line between those two. It's
And Bird had won a playoff series the year before. I like just looked it up actually because that was my thought. Like,
right,
oh, maybe it's Larry Bird, and it's not
yeah.
Larry Bird because they had won a play. They got to the second round the year
They're
before.
right. The Wolves are where Bird's team was in his rookie year. They obviously
Mm-hmm.
we'll see if they can get to the finals, but right, they've never won. And same with Duncan. Duncan's team was second year, so it's crazy. I I want good things for Anthony Edwards. I hope he does well. I hope but it's this this anointing before they're ready thing. They
Mm-hmm.
did it with Tatum too. I mean, oh, he's
Yeah.
19. He runs the league. Like he's not ready. But only rational people thought that, and it doesn't get you on first take or
Doesn't get you
you know,
clicks.
right. Instead, the rest of us just have to watch it and listen to this nonsense. But
This is why I
for
don't
those
listen to
of us
talk
who I do,
radio.
what's that?
This is why I don't listen to talk radio.
That's it. Yeah, this is why Celtic Stuff Live came to be. Is because in the mid 2000s it was like, oh, this is talk radio doesn't know what they're talking about. And here we are 20 years later, and it's pretty much still the same deal.
Yeah,
If not worse.
I think I've listened to maybe 5 minutes of sports talk radio in 20 years, and that was a mistake. Those 5 minutes, I was like, oh, this is.
You can't get that time back. I remember 2004 going to a Red Sox game and listening to EEI. My dad and I, we were going down, and Red Sox were terrible, and they're going to play. And it was the first time I ever seen a Yankee game, and that was actually the day of the fight between Veritek and Arod. Um,
Oh,
and so like, oh, they should sell everybody, and of course they do have a trade. And then the next Red Sox game I went to, Game 4 of the ALCS, which was the same story, but
mm-hmm.
of course they had all these wins to get to that point. But oh, they're terrible, and of course, so what does it prove? Those people know absolutely nothing what's going to happen.
I
Just
mean,
watch it and enjoy it.
you feel bad for them in a sense because they've got like 4 hours to fill a day, and
That's
like,
true.
like
Yeah,
what do? You can't do an Andy Kaufman thing and start reading a novel on the air. So you got to come up with something to argue about, I guess. Nobody wants to hear you talk about rugby.
I guess so. It's just so disingenuous. It's
So maybe it
perk.
doesn't need to exist. Is
Right.
the thing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's it's crazy. All right, so let's talk about this Pacers team. I've watched some of this Pacers team, and it's kind of like the Cavs Magic series where I keep forgetting that it's going to be on, and then I look up and it's the fourth quarter. I like go on ESPN. I'm like, oh, it's the fourth quarter. Whoops, I should
Yeah.
turn that on. But this is the revenge for the in-season tournament loss, which surprised everybody. And then they had that big run, and then they completely fell off the map, right? And am I remembering this correctly? They completely fell off the map, and then here they are in the finals
They
somehow.
had the Halliburton injury. That's
Right.
sort of been, I think, the trend line. So they had that super hot start. They have the in season tournament. Then that terrible, the hamstring injury pretty much decimates Halliburton. And in the meantime, I think what happened is what I saw, I guess, is that Siakam sort of they acquire Siakam,
Right.
they find their level a little bit defensively, and slowly Halliburton sort of returns to form. But they were a 7 seed, and they weren't really. I wouldn't say they caught on fire, and even through these playoffs, I wouldn't say they're sort of that same fervor you saw with the Knicks. Like the
Mm-hmm.
Knicks were it felt like there was a momentum there. Uh, I think this is a Pacers team that's finding itself, certainly, and getting better defensively, but I sort of chalk them up right now as a team that had a little bit more left in the tank than New York did.
Right.
But, you know,
And geez, New York has nothing left in the tank.
they were, yeah.
I was
Yeah,
kind of hoping they were going to win that game 7 because I was like, I kind of want to see what happens if they have no Brunson, and
yeah,
they can add that to the injuries,
yeah.
and but then we're just talking about a sweep,
It's,
and
yeah. And I'm okay
and
with that. I have no shame about that. I'm not saying I'm rooting for injuries, but I'm definitely rooting for the
but
easiest path possible.
how can the Celtics show their championship medal if they don't get pushed to 7 games? Because that's what a true champion does. They get blown out by 50, and then they blow a 20-point lead at home on game 7. That is the heart of a true champion. None of this blowing people out and only losing because of shooting variance.
Yeah.
Like
They're boring.
that is fraudulent behavior, as we all know. So is your read on this Pacers team? I think they feel to me a little similar to Minnesota in that they're a year away
Yeah.
and or two, and the run is if Minnesota gets to the finals, then that's the accomplishment in and of itself, and I just don't think they're ready to win the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the health of Halliburton and getting a full year out of him would be positive. I think the difference is if you're comparing Minnesota and Indiana, I think there's a higher ceiling there with Indiana. I mean, excuse me, with Minnesota.
Minnesota because of
Um,
Ant.
it feels like, yeah, Ant, but also McDaniel's. It feels like there's another level there. Nas Reed. Maybe that's the max you're going to get out of him, but it feels like there's a higher trajectory you could see with Minnesota. That's why I'm a little bit more nervous about them because while they were close games through the year, it does feel like they're trending upwards, and they play with
Mm-hmm.
an aggression that could take anybody out of its game.
Right.
Um, but there's also that you've never been there before, and just judging from those earlier Celtics teams, we know pretty well that what looks great in round 1, 2, or 3 looks very different when you start getting against teams that have been there and done it. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think that's sort of where Boston is going to sort of start to separate themselves. I hope they are at least.
Hopefully. How
Yeah,
much of a factor do you think it is that the Celtics have just been hanging out and like watching?
yeah. Well, first of all, I think anytime they play under Mazzulla, uh, I think he is crazy.
He
Crazy Joe
seems
Mazzulla.
insane.
He is completely nuts. Not enough has been talked about how crazy Joe Mazzulla is. I like it because I like that he doesn't. Um, I like he doesn't let the media in on it. I'm a Belichick guy, so I
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the like the contentiousness a little bit. My favorite there's a there's a post game press conference where what was the movie? Bronx Tale, maybe. Yeah, it was
Okay.
Bronx Tale. I was like, it was one of his favorite movies, and
Hmm.
and he quotes a line from it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares, and he says it so like dead face, like totally stone faced, and like. Is he just like telling the reporter no one cares about a question, or I don't? No one can tell because he's completely insane. But I love it. I love that guy. Like he is I don't even know what line of work he'd go into if he wasn't doing this, but that man is
He's.
certifiable. I love it, and I
I
think
felt
that's
like
part of the reason why they're successful.
I
You
felt
know,
like the first sign for me that it was going to be a little different this year was I think it was even in the preseason when he was quoting some reporter's like story back to them from like
yes,
5 years ago,
yes,
and I'm like,
yeah, Gary
oh,
Washburn,
oh, he did research.
yeah, Washburn, yeah, because Gary Washburn, because he would always be on him about like shooting threes and all that, and he does not care. He will push back, and like I think that there is like it is like a crazy like a sort of genius about that where to get over the hump, like there's like the traditional model of okay, you're going to be the great player, and the great player eventually is grizzled and learns and all that. But it's like to go back to 2004 Red Sox. There had to be a little bit like off about that team, whether it
Hmm.
was Manny Ramirez or Millar or any of those guys. There was
Are you saying Manny Ramirez was a little bit off?
a little off, just a little left of center. I'm not talking politically. I'm just saying, just Um, but I think there's a benefit to that of being a little crazy. I think sometimes when you get sort of stuck in ways, that's a team. I think first of all, I think he's a good coach. I don't think
Hmm.
he's a terrible coach. I think his methods are a little, um, how they come across are a little strange, but variance matters. I mean, you danger card Ryan Bernardoni, who was on the show many times, and you've seen him on Twitter. I mean, it's a math problem, right? If
Right.
you're taking X number of threes versus X number of twos, and you shoot this percentage, you're probably going to win. And it's just math. There's really I think there's some things that aren't great about it in terms of the soul of the game of basketball, but
Yeah.
that's winning and losing. In I mean, losing to the Heat in game two, math. Losing to
Pure math. Yeah.
the Cavs, game two, math. Like it's not a it's not necessarily about who executed better, who did this better. I mean, some of it leads into that, but it's math a lot of times, and that's maddening to those of us who, old heads who watched in the '80s, and it was 2 point shots, 90% of the time.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the only real adjustment the Celtics have made, because you always hear about adjustments in series and all that, the only real adjustment they've made is quit screwing around, guys. And they've won,
Yep,
handled
yep,
both series pretty easily. And
yep.
part of me wonders if, this is, they didn't play a competitive game for a month at the end of
No,
the year. They haven't really had a competitive game since then.
right.
And part of me wonders if they've just been sitting on stuff.
Oh, I
If
think so.
they've got plays and stuff that, like, if it was football, like, how many trick plays have they been working on in this time period, because they haven't had to show anything in 2 months.
I totally agree. How don't you, I think that there's like 1,000 things they could be doing with Porzingis they didn't show during the regular season.
Hmm.
Like we knew in 6 weeks of regular season basketball, this team was going to be a 1, 2, or 3 seed. They were going to have home court. Like the whole season was already like we knew where this was going to end up, and we knew what the
Yeah.
expectations were. Why show anything? So, but I agree with you. Like the last 6 weeks, the last 10 weeks, there's been nothing to play for. So
Yeah.
you sit on it, you work on it. I mean, they've been sitting for 4 days before they play tonight, and they're not even going to be tested then. So part of it, probably a lot. There's a lot of Denver stuff that we're not going to see that they would have
Hmm.
had. But that with Porzingis, I remember watching the first preseason game and be like, "Oh, this is different,"
Yeah.
And I'm not like a huge Porzingis guy, but just the way that I've become more of a Porzingis guy, but just the way that he just changes the geometry of the floor. Um, you can't play him the same way. You can't. Al Horford can do a lot of things Porzingis can't, but not everything. And
Right.
there's an angle to that that changes. And I think you take that because if you and that's sort of why I lean on Mazzulla being a real difference maker for them. Because if you were just leaning on how much are the players growing and adapting from being a 17, 18-year-old guy in the conference finals to now, that's a hard trajectory to see that. Just as can they do it on their own? But you
Mhm.
take a Mazzulla, you take a Porzingis, you take the sort of I think good leadership you're getting from Drew Holiday, and I think then the question is then it does return back to Tatum and Brown, because
Right.
those and I think we've seen signs that they're getting it, but they're still 26, 27 years old. I mean, they've got another 5, 6 years of their own prime. So
Yeah.
that's the thing that I think people aren't. Yeah, they're. I'm sorry, Bill Simmons is bored, but because he's seen them in the conference finals for 6 years or 7 years or whatever. But this is when they should be starting to make their run, not when they're 18.
And this is plenty of extra time for him to learn the WNBA names. You know, he has
I
all this
can't believe
time.
that. Fever is hard to say, right? The Aces. Whoa! Oh my gosh! What on earth? What? Like what?
And then he does a segment with his daughter.
Right afterwards. Yeah.
With
Hey, what'd you learn at school, Zoe? Oh my gosh. It's just that guy. I probably like a lot of people watching. When Bill Simmons started late '90s, I had his newsletter. I read
mhm.
everything. By the time he went to ESPN, I was so out on him. In fact, okay, my little brush with greatness, there was
Okay.
a secret message board for really big Celtics fans. This is back in the message board era, oh
Uh
03,
huh.
oh 04, oh 05. And somebody who I knew who was a writer had asked if I could join, and he said, no, I couldn't join the message board because I had media aspirations. I have no media aspirations.
Wow.
So Bill Simmons gave the kibosh to me. So
Wow. So, and
weird.
and you have held a grudge
I've held a
ever
grudge ever
since.
since. Yeah. These are the early days of the internet, back when things were crazy. But
That
anyway,
was back when I was on a poker message board and would talk to Nate Silver about movies.
right?
Yeah.
They're like
So
us. We were equals,
yeah, and now not so much.
No, not so
Um,
much. I'm okay
I
with
think
it.
what I think is kind of interesting is we saw a little bit in the Cavs series is the Celtics have this switch they can flip where they go, oh right, we have Drew Holiday. We'll just use him
Yeah.
now. Like, and nothing else is working. Tatum's cold, Brown's cold, Horford's over 10. We'll just have Drew Holiday win this game. Yeah, it's fine.
Mhm.
We'll just activate him.
And I felt like those, especially games 3 and 4, like the first times I saw, like it felt like they sort of figured out how to use Drew Holiday too,
Hmm.
right? Like I mean, you understand you've got all these weapons, and you got to fit Porzingis in, and then you got to fit Drew in. You got to, there's a lot of chairs you got to move around to make it sort of fit. But what those were so like two really impressive games of figuring out his spots. Derek White had gone cold,
Hmm.
so he needed to assert that role, and boy, did he ever! I mean, he just phenomenal way to close that series out, and that I think there's probably some question marks about whether or not Drew was that guy.
Hmm.
Still, they hadn't asked that of him, and boy, he came through in the right spot for them. So I think now they know when they can pull that lever. I'd like to see Derek White back shooting a little bit closer to his norm, but he was so hot in Game One. It's
Yeah.
or even Game One through the Heat series. It's sort of like water probably finding its level more than anything else.
I think I saw a tweet saying that said the Celtics have 8 guys who can kill you, and if 3 of them have a good night, it's game over.
It's over. Yeah,
So I like to beat them. You either have to go nuclear, like the Heat did in Game 2, or they have to all be off.
yeah.
like game 2. And so I have already bet the 5-game series with losing game 2. You can bet that specific outcome, and I bet it in the first round because Mike Mandel, that was his predictions. I'm like, I'll bet it, I'll do it, and then I didn't bet it the second round, and I should have, and so I'm going with it this time, um, because then the media will freak out again, and it'll be so much fun. It'll be so annoying.
I think so. It's funny. I think game two will be fine. I'm worried about
Okay,
game one more than game two, actually.
really?
And there's one name that's the reason for that. Tony Brothers.
Oh yeah, I was thinking
Tony
Nesmith.
Brothers. You know, I the officials. He has not given them a good whistle in a decade plus. I think so.
You don't think they'll just come
As
out hot?
well, they just were playing, so it's sort of like you were saying. Celtics have been setting for 4 or 5 days. They're, you know, I think it may take some time to sort of get the juices going again.
Mm,
Uh, the longer the series goes with Indiana, the better it is for Boston. Not that you want a long series, but I
right.
really think Game One is Tony Brothers having sitting for a bit. Um, that could uh, have some detrimental effects. As Tommy Heinsohn once said, "Tony, you're not my brother." So I think I'm gonna. I'm just gonna. I think there's sort of a thing about Game Two. When I back in the Celtic Stuff Live days, we used to have credentials. So we'd go down to the Garden. The
Hmm.
only game I went to in the '08 playoff run was Game Two against the Pistons, which was the only game the Celtics lost at home through that whole playoff run. So there's a Game Two thing going on with the
They
Celtics.
didn't let you come back after that.
They they ripped up. They took my credentials and just ripped them up and threw them in my face. It was
That's fair.
sad, but
Bad luck, not coming back, but
you know, it all worked out in the end. It worked out just fine. I was okay with it.
how much of an impact do you think Nesmith is going to be in this? Is
Oh,
he? I say his name wrong every time, so but how much of a revenge factor is there?
I don't think there's like a personal revenge factor for him necessarily. I thought the Celtics actually did right by him. They sent him to a good spot, a place where he could grow and develop. Um, Rick Carlisle is a hell of a coach. Like
Yeah.
honestly, I'm as worried about Rick Carlisle as I am about Tyrese Halliburton. He has a way of doing things. Now, maybe this team is maybe too young or too inexperienced to be able to take full advantage of things. But Rick Carlisle in Dallas, anytime the Celtics will play Rick Carlisle in Dallas, scare the hell out of me. Just because he's that guy is a really smart basketball coach. Jermaine Black Bear, by the way, let's not forget that. And I think that's really I worry about on the coach's side. Neesmith is crash. Like he is just energy, right?
Hmm.
Um, he's used to those guys, so he'll have some comfort.
Right.
But there's probably a lot of confidence on the side of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, knowing that they've busted his behind in practice for years. Uh, I think maybe some others might be taken off guard by him, but I don't think those two will be. I think they'll be able to handle it. He's going to do his crazy things. He's going to do
Right.
his the things where is he hurt? Oh no, he's okay, but that's probably not humanly possible. He'll do that stuff, But Halliburton just going nuts is probably the biggest thing that I worry about. And T.J. McConnell the T.J. McConnell Peyton Pritchard grudge match
That was my
is
next question.
we all want to go there. As you know, the Duke household is Team Peyton Pritchard. We, my son is a huge Peyton Pritchard fan, always has been. It's not why he wore number 11, but there's some kismet there. They
It was
met.
for Enos Cantor, wasn't it?
It was yes, big yes. He wants to be the reason no one else wears 11. That's the. Um, we actually got to a Peyton Pritchard camp last summer, and they
Oh, cool.
played. Will and Peyton played. There was a foul. Should have been anyway. We're not going to get into it. Will should have beaten them, but we're not going to get into it. We're not going to get into it. But anyway, so I'm Team Peyton Pritchard, and I look forward to really despising McConnell because not only does he have the Pacers thing, but he was also a Sixer before too, and so there's
Right.
a lot of reasons to dislike TJ McConnell.
I feel like that matchup is going to produce a lot of memes, and I'm really interested in the memes that it's going to create,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of potential there. I'm a little disappointed that we aren't all calling Peyton Pritchard playoffs P at this point. I don't know why that hasn't caught on.
I
I've
love it. I
I've
love
tweeted
it.
that a couple times and is not no one seems to be catching it. So I mean crypto P is good, but playoffs P I think it should, the calendar is turned. We're in May. It's playoffs time. So,
I like it. I like
you
it.
know.
No, I mean, I think that's. I will use it as much as I can if just to try to spread the good word of that one out.
Seems like a
He
no-brainer.
find somebody who has a better shooting percentage with buzzer beating shots like that. I don't know why, but he honestly, I almost would rather him take shots at the end of a game than anybody else because it feels like if the ball's in his hands, it's going up and it's probably got a good shot of going in.
Yeah,
He's really on a heater with that stuff.
he's well, for one, he doesn't shy away from them like a lot of people, they're trying to save their shooting percentage,
Yeah,
which is dumb.
it's
And then
terrible.
I always point out, did you know this? I probably have already told you this, that in high school rules, that's not a shot attempt.
Really?
A desperation three is by rule, by the NFHS rules, it's not a field goal attempt if it's like an unnatural shooting motion or something. I forget the exact wording. It doesn't count against you. I mean, if it goes in, it's a shot attempt,
Yeah.
but it's not technically a shot attempt, like a full court, that,
Wow.
Hail Mary thing.
I did not know that. How
I mean,
about that?
if it's just a normal buzzer beating shot, then yes. But if
Yeah.
you're sort of
Well, like
that
a
sort of
foul,
thing,
like if you're fouled in the act of shooting, and
yeah,
that doesn't count as an attempt. But
it's similar to that,
all right,
but not in the
I didn't
NBA. I
realize
don't think.
that. That's interesting. Wow. We'd have
So
to call Chris Barstow for that one. That's good.
yeah,
My own
so
college roomie.
if you're trying to save your shooting percentage by not taking a 3/4 court shot, don't do it. There's no point.
There you go.
You know.
They got to save the huddle stats. I'm sure. The thing is, the huddle's so bad it probably assigns the shot. Even if it did, they just assign it to somebody who's not even
That's
on the
true.
court.
And then there's some teams that just the stats are creative.
It's amazing how much latitude one can have with a stat. Yeah, yeah. It would be nice if there was more uniformity in that.
It would be.
It's not, and it's not that. It we talk, and I don't want to go on to your shot clock stuff, but I am team shot clock. For those who are watching, and you'll ask at some point because you have to. That's part
Right.
of the podcast, right? Is like you have to ask about shot clock.
Yeah.
But I think like there should be some sort of uniformity in terms of the stat side of things, and we start talking about adding people to the table and having statisticians and so forth. That's sort of part. I think that's going to be somewhat part of the mix.
Yeah. Well, there are states where you have to like record all of those stats and feed them into the state database,
Mm,
and like within a certain time frame. And so if you want to, if you're playing a team and you want to know how many assists per game their power forward has, that information is there
mm.
and it's mandatory. Might not be accurate, but it's mandatory. There might be some home cooking,
I mean,
but
we just started talking about how the heel points aren't aren't happening. That's just a W or an L. So we're talking about a fictive field goal percentage, or that might be a whole other level. But it's the priority and the emphasis that so much gets put on the sport of basketball. And there's an inequity. Probably
mhm.
like you had Gary Stevens on, and you had other athletic directors. It's difficult for them. I'm sure on the athletic director side to balance out all these things, but now, admittedly, as a basketball parent and as somebody who loves the game, no matter what town you're in or whatever, um, there's a there's there is an interest that is statewide. There's a reason why
Hmm.
Maine, um, has this love for the game, and so I'm not going to tell Texas football to hey, dial it back, guys, a bit, because
I mean,
you know,
there's a reason where if you're watching a stream of like Spruce Mountain playing whoever, there's
yep,
200 people watching it.
yeah,
Like a random stream on Facebook. As
absolutely,
like that's insane. And that's just a class B school.
yeah,
That's not Portland versus South Portland
right,
or, Oceanside Camden or Caribou Presque Isle or something like that. That's
yeah,
like I forget which game it was, and it wasn't like Halldale or something. It was
mhm.
Bruce and I want to say Morse, but I'm trying to remember if they played
Wow,
Morse. My brain says Morse, and it wasn't a big game. It was just
hmm,
a normal game, and I just happened to look at the thing, and I'm like, holy cow, there's 200 people watching this thing.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
There's a lot that's talked about all the things that would make the game better, and there is like an equity thing that you have to think about. Admittedly, I'm in the tank for basketball, so anytime it could benefit basketball, I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. But like, I understand that you have to sort of look at the whole picture, the whole constellation of
Right.
these things, and the way sports are funded through schools and all that. I get all that, but it is we're entering an era, and this is what you sort of talked a little bit as you know. I listen to the podcast. We talk with Troy Barney's, and you talk with some of these other guests you've had, and Chris too. There's the pay for play aspect of what parents and kids are expecting changes the way high school sports, and I think high school basketball, the expectations of fans, parents, communities, what have you. And that, I don't know, maybe in Southern Maine um, it's been more of an impact, and certainly moving up the mid coast and
Hmm.
into Bangor area and so forth. But to me, that hasn't really been talked about enough, about how much that changes perceptions, changes presentation, changes the way of just what you were talking about in terms of stats. Because there's stats I looked at and I'm like, really, that he did that? That's surprising. Or she did this. Um, but there's so much riding on it, and there's so much
Hmm.
putting being put on kids. Um, it's a hard. There's a lot of stress put on these kids to perform and excel, and we love the sport, but they're also kids too, and I don't know. It's an interesting time as sort of all these things sort of change. When you and I were in school, high school sports were sort of the pinnacle, and
Well, there's the peach basket. They had to take the peach basket, and you had
this
to
is
get the ball
true.
out of the basket.
Yeah,
So,
it's that's right. But you look at Cooper. I mean, Cooper Flag is the highest leverage games he's playing have nothing to do with high school sports.
right.
In Florida. It's go figure. But that's where the game is. It seems.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And you just had a kid go get all the way through that, and Will's going to the community college, right?
Yeah, CMCC. Yep,
CMCC.
yep. Pumped.
Yeah, so you
Jack.
have survived the gauntlet, but I mean, that's what you're talking about. Like the upside of it is that he's gonna go play at that like really good program,
Yeah.
and that might not have been possible if you didn't put the time in and a bunch of other stuff. And he was kind of a late bloomer, if I'm remembering
Oh yeah.
correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. Very late. Yeah. Well, and he's young, but it's it's so weird. Like, the age thing. Like he's not 18. He won't turn 18. Like the week before he leaves for CM, he'll turn 18.
Oh wow.
So there's the age thing. I mean, I remember going to these tournaments when I'd coach seventh, eighth grade or whatever. And there was one tournament we played at the Lewiston Armory, and there was a kid who was a year older than him. So he's seventh grade. This kid was in eighth grade and 6'9", and my kid was, I don't, maybe 5'1", 5'2" at that, maybe. Um, so there's the age thing of it. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how it goes because that's like parents. If we're doing the Bill Simmons thing, this is parent corner, right? We're going to talk
Okay,
about
sure. All right.
no, but like there's just such a high priority put on like, well, we won a tournament when we're in seventh grade or eighth grade. It's just like not everyone's gonna bloom late, but like I think there's so much importance put on that stuff that I mean the best players, the McDonald's kids, all those kids, some were great, some weren't, some were bloomed late, some bloomed early, but like there's just way too much pressure and intensity on that middle school level. It's kind of crazy to me, and the way things shake out by the time you're a senior, maybe 180 degrees from what you thought they would be as a seventh, eighth grader.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
mean,
there's a
my
lot of
kid's
effort put there and money.
my kid's 7 and he's terrible, and it's not going to be a surprise to anyone who's seen him play. He has no idea what he's doing, but he's 7, you
Yeah,
know. And I'm just like, my approach is he's playing little league. He can't hit for anything, and I'm just like, you know what? He's having fun. He's running around outside, and I just want him to have like a sense, like some sort of base. So if he decides he wants to play baseball or basketball, he knows a little bit of
yeah,
what he's doing,
yeah.
and
Hmm.
then you go from there.
I think, I think like I've talked to, so I was the head of our sort of local booster group for the youth group. I just got off that, and I sent this message to him, and I'm like, one of the most important things is like that we do more than win trophies and championships and all these things. We've had teams have done well. McCamden sort of has had this sort of thing, and it had fallen off a bit, and now we're trying to get it back together. But more important than that, it's about you don't know who that kid is. Like
Hmm.
the kids who are on the travel teams that I coached, my son always loved it. He was never the best player, never the strongest player. I mean, physically strong. He was always the smallest or one of the smallest. But the most important thing for him or the guys that played with him was love it, love the sport, love the game, love playing for each other, playing with each other. Because the thing that to me, the thing that you're trying to get across to these kids as you're coaching them is, especially in the youth level. I mean, high school is different. I didn't coach that, but
Right.
to me, it's about you're trying to get these kids the tools to like know how to work together, like lifelong stuff,
Yeah.
and that's what most people aren't going to be Cooper or Landon Clark or Nick Mayo or Troy. Most people aren't, but maybe through sports, maybe through basketball, maybe they love the sport, but maybe they learn things about how to work hard and get what you want out of it. And that's the stuff that as parents we're all trying to do. Anybody can do that. I think
Yeah.
you may not be able to, teach, perfect 1-2-1 uh, one zone press, but you can do that. Um,
At minimum, you can teach them how the over and back rule works, so that they're not yelling it incorrectly at the officials.
that's one of my favorite parts of following Twitter during basketball season is when you go somewhere and somebody is completely off track with the officiating, and you're like, oh, they don't know that rule. Over and back is not what you thought it was, and over the back is another one.
That's over the yeah. It's
You love
I
that
think they
one.
should have a laminated card that they hand out that has like 6 or 7 basic rules. This is
Yeah,
how this works.
yeah.
Please stop yelling. It is not the official's fault that your team is down 40. I promise.
Now look, I will say, and you know, I know a number of the officials, and I talk to them, and they all don't curse me out when they see me. I do have opinions about officiating,
Uh huh.
but most of them do a pretty good job. They really
Yeah.
do, and it's a hard job. If people understood all that they have to look at and see, I think they would have a different appreciation for what the officials have to do. And it's hard to find. They're hard to find nowadays, right? No one is signed up to get yelled at.
Right.
In my day job, I'm sort of used to that idea, but most people aren't used to being criticized, from 15 feet behind you. But it's hard what they do. I think that there are some things that should be viewed more as um, players gain advantage from things that are not called. But
Yeah.
that's my opinion, and I share it vocally at the Camden Hills gym every boys game. I let them know.
All right, I'm gonna
There's a
try to
lot
get
of love.
this. I'm gonna try to get this done in under an hour because the program I use, I'm gonna rebroadcast. We're rebroadcasting this live, and it has to an hour's the limit to do this. So real quick,
Mm.
give me a like a North for next year. What do you think? What are you thinking?
Brewers gonna be tough. Brewer had
Brewer.
all but one of their players last year was were juniors. They are going to be a really tough team. They graduated Caden Philbrick, who was a jump out of the gym senior, great kid. They're going to be tough. They're going to have a
I was
lot of seniors,
I was
senior
trying to
ladies.
remember the last time a state champion didn't make the playoffs the next year, but
Mm.
it would be weird to see them go state champion out of the playoffs, then top of the heap next year.
That's the weird thing about A North is that there are like every night is a dogfight. Every single night you've got something. I mean, Gardner's been down, but they've got guys who can play, and that sophomore class becoming juniors, that'll be tough. Uh, you know, I think it really could be another year where anybody can do it. I think, I'll be a homer here a little bit. I think that yeah, they'll lose Will, and they're going to lose seven seniors leaving. But
Jeez.
that sophomore class that's coming up is, or going to be juniors, is going to be tough. There's there's sort of they're getting to I'm not saying we're at Madomic levels of just wave after wave of incoming players, but I think that the youth program is going to start to feed a little bit stronger than we've seen in the last few years. So, um, I think they'll be tough. Meso losing Merrick is a big blow. I would have picked them to probably be the favorite,
Yeah.
but Drake and I mean they've got a lot of guys who can play at Meso. They'll be a tough out, and there's not going to be a lot of size anywhere. So it's all going to be run and gun. If you can get to an A North gym and watch some games, it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. And the girls' side too. I think the girls' side is going to be phenomenal. Again, I think Cameron's going to be up in it. Lawrence is going to be tough. It's going to be. I know that there's criticism of five versus four classes. I've seen five classes for obvious reasons. Just look at the enrollment numbers. But
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be a lot of fun basketball in A North this year. And, I don't want to leave anybody out. Coney is going to, Parker Morin is a guy on the rise there. And, he'll have more shots with Parker Sargent leaving. Um, Certainly, Mount Blue is going to take a step back without Evans, Sterling. Congrats to him to go to USM. But
Oh, is he
but
going
I
to
think
USM?
what's that?
He's going to USM.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah. A number of guys signed, and he was looking at that early on. So excited for him. Good kid, really good kid. Um, you know, Pellerin's going to have Lawrence in it too. So I think it really is going to be sort of an anybody's ball game. But Hamden, I didn't mention Hamden, but they're going to lose Zach. They're going to lose JJ. Those are huge losses.
That's a lot. Yeah.
But I don't know. Russ Bartlett kind of knows what he's doing out there a little bit. He's kind of a good coach.
Eh,
The
you know.
Hennigan boys, like they'll be in it. So I think it's going to be a dogfight. I really do. I think there's any of four teams who could win A North, and I'd love for my Windjammers to do a Why Not Us campaign and
Right.
take it home.
I've missed the heyday of A North, the early A North when it was 12, 13 teams, and you had Hamden and Madomic and Oceanside when it was a real bloodbath.
Mm.
Where I remember the year I was talking to, I forget which coach it was, and I said, realistically, how many teams could win this region? There's like a week left in the season. He goes 10. And I'm well, there's only 8 playoff spots. He's like, yeah, I know.
It's
Tell me about it.
brutal. I mean, and that's the thing. Like you said, like I mean, Brewer legitimately could have been a tournament team. There were some
Yeah.
injuries that if you could pick, it's sort of like NCAA. You could pick. You'd almost want Brewer in there. because there were some injuries there at the end that some teams might have had some hard times. But it's weird. I would also say it's weird for Camden as a Camden Hills Windjammer fan. It's weird to sort of play the two games, one game against Oceanside, one game against Madomic, and then sort of like watch them kind of go off to the expo and do their thing. Well, we're sort of on this completely other journey when we've been at each other's throats for decades. It's bizarre.
It's a little
but
weird.
it's also kind of nice because you sort of like you're on your own journey without having to.
It was
battle.
weird when Oceanside was in the north and they would go up to Bangor. And then it was like, oh, they're up in Bangor. I wonder what's happening up there.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. I miss it. I sort of miss it, but I sort of like you're not like that stuff. The best game, and no one talks about it, but the best game I saw all year was the Camden Oceanside game at Camden, where it went down to it, and Carter Galley, a guy can shoot, man.
He can
I
shoot,
wish
he
him
can
luck
fill it
at
up.
Kinsale. Even Cohen, they're gonna go up there and kill it, I'm sure. But that was a game for the ages right there. It just came up on the wrong side of it.
Well, there was the Lincoln Oceanside game at Oceanside,
Yep.
which might have been the game of the year. And I forget why I didn't go to that. I was going to go to. I ended up going to the girls' game down here and regretted it when I turned on the radio and I hear Don Shields losing his mind
Oh my
because
gosh.
there's like 10 seconds left in the game, and I'm like, oh, what's happening here? Okay.
Yeah. And how hard is it for Oceanside? Those guys had a target on their backs for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's all credit to those guys, and they didn't come home with a gold ball, but they worked hard, and there was a lot of scrutiny on them that they never should have had, thanks to Dana White. So
yeah, that they didn't deserve at all.
not at all, not at
But
all.
they got that trip to Vegas. They got that free trip to Vegas.
Oh man, I know. Well, I wonder when Coach DePatsy gets called by Dana White this year because Madonna's beating everybody by 30, how that will go.
Well, he'll keep it under 100 for sure. He'll have the JVs playing 2 minutes into the game.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's probably true. I look forward. They're going to have a hell of a year, though. Madonna will.
They should, yeah.
It's. I look forward to seeing them. V. Meller and Will have been close buddies on the soccer field for a long time, so we root for like heck for him. And but Coach Patsy's done a good job over there, so we'll be rooting for them as long as they're not playing Camden.
Right, except for that one night a year.
That one night a year, that's it. But and Coach Reed's a Duke fan, so look, there's reasons to love these local coaches down here on the Mid Coast.
I have to tell you a Larry Reed story when we get off air here, but you'll appreciate it. But yeah, so to wrap up, give me a Celtics prediction. Celtics in what against Pacers? You think a sweep?
Sweep them.
Ooh,
yeah.
All right.
7-4. Get plenty of time off before they play the Timberwolves. I'd love to beat Kyrie. I'd love that. That would be
fun.
That would be, but I think it's Timberwolves and Celtics and Celtics.
Timberwolves in 7?
No.
6?
No, man.
Celtics no, I mean against Dallas.
You think Dallas? Yeah.
No, I mean like against Dallas. You think Timberwolves over Dallas in 7?
I do. Yeah, I think so. Luka will whine and cry his way towards enough wins to push it that far, but yeah, he endless. I mean, Tatum complains too much, but Luka puts a whole nother level on it.
It's ridiculous. Yeah,
honestly, it's crazy.
All right, we're gonna wrap this up. Thank you so much, John, for joining me. Where can people find you on the Twitter?
And find me on the Twitter at CSL_Duke.
All right. This has been a production of MaineBasketballRankings.com, your source for your primary source for Maine high school basketball coverage and football now and lacrosse and everything else, and the only place where the heel points work. If you like this, leave a review, subscribe, do all the things, and I'll be back with another episode soon. Thank you so much.